everybody. Okay, so everybody got their Zoom tablets? Playing with them? All right. Well, hopefully it's been an enormously exciting day for you all. I know it has been for all of us boxers. We're having a great time at this first conference. And I thought I'd spend a little time talking to you about, well, at least on the agenda, it's labeled as talking a little bit about the journey of content management and how it's gone from sucky to sexy. So I'm going to tell you a story, and along the way I'll tell you a little about me, since I didn't get much of a chance to introduce myself to you earlier. And then, of course, we'll introduce our last featured speaker of the day. So let me kind of take you back about 15 years. And I've talked to enough of you in the audience to know there are some of you that will remember these days firsthand. You know, back in the mid-90s or so, we actually saw a really interesting time in technology. We saw all sorts of different technology solutions booming everywhere around content in some form or fashion. Content management tools, collaboration tools. Everyone was talking about knowledge management. Remember that? Right? Tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge and all that fun stuff. And those tools were kind of running rampant, frankly. There were tools to do everything, and they were all separate. So you had XML management tools and document management tools and web content management tools and rich media tools. You remember all this stuff, right? And the unfortunate thing about all that was that they were all doing kind of sort of the same thing at their base core, which is helping to aggregate and distribute content in a meaningful way. But they all did it slightly differently. And so, of course, companies were burdened with all these disparate systems and silos of information. And, of course, users needed to get at this stuff from all these different systems easily, and yet they couldn't because they had to go to 6 different places. So out of this whole mess was born this concept, which I admittedly helped to create and further, called enterprise content management. Well, why wouldn't you just sort of blend all these technologies into one massive platform that solved all these problems, let you aggregate content of any kind, and mix and match what you needed for different audiences and user communities, which sounded in principle like a pretty good idea. Don't need 6 or 7 systems anymore. You can just use one. It's better, it's faster, it's bigger, it's all that, and more expensive, of course. So thus was born ECM, and we all had our struggles with that over the years, but it's turned out to be some pretty rich technology that probably most of you in the room have invested in some way, shape, or form over the last decade. And I think what was really interesting is that ECM didn't really ever materialize exactly the way it was envisioned from the outset. All those technologies never quite merged into one. Lots of them did, but not all of them. You know, think for a moment about web publishing. That's still kind of a separate process with its own separate tools, with its own set of processes specific to publishing information to websites. So that never quite made its way fully into the ECM suite. And the same thing's kind of true around digital asset management or rich media handling, where long-form video and short-form video and rich media and things take a lot of special handling. Everything from full text indexing, closed caption copy or subtitle text, to clip editing and all sorts of streaming demands and so on and so forth. And that too kind of remained a little bit specialized. And so ECM sort of ended up, a few of those silos kind of popped back out, and ECM sort of really ended up being most appropriate for these bet your business on it, super important back office applications that most often were very process centric, decision heavy, and were very much about compliance, which is a pretty tough set of problems to solve. So that ECM technology is so well suited to doing those things, and is really what those systems of record that Jeff Moore talked about earlier today. So that's all great. Those systems are in use, and those are really geared toward the users that operate within those business processes, right? So kind of a select set of folks that are really working on that back office, bet your business on it kind of stuff. But the mass community of kind of the everyday knowledge worker, the people that just need to get to their stuff in a timely fashion and know they're working with current information, were not really addressed with most of those ECM systems. It wasn't really designed to be perfectly attuned to the lightweight use case of the everyday worker. And so along comes this idea called SharePoint. And SharePoint, before it really got out into the market, was going to be the panacea, right? The tool for the masses, the one that everybody could use in a lightweight form or fashion, as opposed to the ECM stuff for the more compliance and decision-heavy stuff. And then SharePoint comes out. You guys remember the term basic content services started being thrown around, and everyone was pretty excited about that, kind of the other end of the spectrum, if you will, from the other high-end solutions from ECM providers. And so we saw SharePoint hit the market, and you know what? It really wasn't basic content services. Not even Microsoft wanted it positioned that way. You know, it's pretty feature rich, and it's got a configurable toolkit. And frankly, Microsoft wanted to see it positioned much more toward ECM. And truth be told, SharePoint with its configurations and tools and customizations and all that kind of stuff, frankly, was much closer to the same end of the spectrum that the ECM vendors were on than anything that the mass user community at this end of the spectrum really wanted. And I think that's why that whole end of the spectrum has seen adoption by select user communities where it really makes sense, but not very often is it on every single user's device or desktop. And so this kind of unaddressed masses are hungering for a solution that's simple enough that they can just get to their stuff, right? Now, take that whole conversation aside for a moment and think about the technological revolution, a lot of which Mark Andreessen and I were talking about this morning, of what was happening with the consumerization of IT in its earliest days. We started to see the emergence of mobile, right? So mobile and smartphones became much more normal and expected. Everyone's got one. Internet access is rampant everywhere. We're starting to see the emergence of Facebook and then Twitter and all these wonderful communication and social tools that help us interact with the people and causes and events and things that we care about in a way that's pretty powerful and really simple and available anywhere. So those things start to take off, and now we've got, you know, these differing expectations in the workplace where working that way becomes a big desire of that same group of kind of unaddressed masses that just need to get to their stuff. So that kind of starts to form the perfect storm. And guess when Box was born? Right about that time, when that unaddressed mass of people really were thirsting for a solution to just get to their stuff, coupled with this technological wave that made getting to your stuff a whole lot easier and a lot more interesting. And the ability to share and interact with others who care about the same stuff becomes sort of the normal way of interacting online. Well, that really is kind of a perfect storm, and I think why you guys and others like you have chosen Box, because it's that lightweight solution for everyone, for the masses, if you will, that just need to get to their stuff when they need it and know that it's safe, secure, current, and available whenever I want it, wherever I want it. And that's kind of what I see as that really interesting journey between or from, you know, enterprise, traditional on-prem to sexy, to doing something that users love to use, that they get excited about using, that is the thing that they would choose to use at home. And I think back on Jeff Moore's comment today about, why am I so powerful at home and so lame in the office, right? I thought that was a great quote. And you know, if Box does one thing, it's to make you powerful in the office and to do it with tools that people really enjoy and still be able to look a CIO in the face and say, your content is safe with Box. And that's really, I think, a great journey and a wonderful solution to this kind of unaddressed mass set of people who've been looking for something for so long, and complements the other end of the spectrum where all these bet your business on it applications remain so important and where you've invested so much. Now, my journey along this has also been, well, parallel perhaps. You know, as I said, I started with Documentum back in 1995, and I was just talking to one of my old customers, Allergan, who I've worked with a lot over the last 15, 20 years, and saying, you know, there's no bigger champion of what Documentum stands for than me. I have a ton of personal investment in what that company means and the kinds of problems that it's trying to solve. But I also couldn't be a bigger champion for Box, because I really believe in the problems we're trying to solve. And for me, you know, joining Documentum when it was 60 people and $10, $12 million in revenue, tiny little company, you know, taking us through roughly 15 or 16 acquisitions before we actually decided to be acquired by EMC in late 2003. And at that time, we were about 350 million, I think. Stuck through that with EMC and really had a wonderful journey of learning a lot about a really big corporation and how to work integrations with acquired technologies and starting to look at how things like content management can be leveraged in whole new ways. But after a number of years at EMC, I was kind of hankering for that small company, that agile environment, that fun camaraderie where we all want to work really, really hard and all have our eye on the brass ring and we're all just running as fast as we can to get there. And so I was looking for something that was, well, actually I had 5 criteria I'll share with you. So as I started looking around the market, I said, I want a company that's, well, first and foremost, I'm not driving like 2 hours every day to work. So it's got to be between Palo Alto and San Francisco, because I live here in the city. And got to be small and exciting. So kind of the 20 to 100 million-ish phase. Has to have a very dynamic executive team. Boy, got that in spades, huh? and who's really fun and excited and energetic and passionate about what they do and needs someone else like that. And that has a fast-growing customer community and on all that good stuff. And oh, by the way, if your technology is more than 5 years old, I'm not interested. I was absolutely going to look for something new, nimble, modern, and sexy that I could be part of. And boy, did I find it in Box. So that's kind of how I got here. Now, I'm going to echo back to a couple things that I find really compelling about Box, the principles that we hold very dear as an entire company when we think about how to create products and capabilities that you can benefit from and that you'll love and use. You heard Aaron talk a lot about a commitment to simplicity. And I think that's really, in a lot of ways, our secret sauce. Again, giving tools that users love and would choose to use on their own time, and yet we can say to an IT organization, your information is safe with Box, is a pretty compelling thing. But that simplicity is not the traditional software that we've all grown up with. So keeping that focus on simplicity is so important. You heard us talk about openness, about making sure that we can integrate into all sorts of different applications so that we can take Box-managed content and surface it wherever it makes sense to make users more productive in whatever environment they want to work in and whatever device they want to work on. You also heard us talk about the commitment to mobile and some of our great partnership announcements today with HP and with Motorola and so on, and the mobile device manufacturers as well, are really critically important. It's a little early to say the desktop is dead, but if it isn't mobile, it's just not as productive. And of course, we all, through all of that, are incredibly dedicated to making sure that we delight you, that we make sure that you're happy, that you're enjoying the products and the service of Box, that you're getting the most out of your investment, and that you feel like you've partnered with a company who really cares that you're enjoying what you do with Box and that we're helping you do your business things better. And that commitment to delighting our customers is something that you should hold us to. And tell us when we're not. Tell us when we're not delighting you, because that's something we have to fix. If you're not happy, we're not happy. So I guess at the end, it's all about delivering happiness. And I am thrilled to have with us today the master of delivering happiness, the CEO of Zappos, Tony Hsieh, who wrote a book by the same name, Delivering Happiness. So please welcome Tony Hsieh to the stage to tell us a little bit about that. Thanks, Tony.
So the book actually came out last year, and I'm just going to flip through some pictures real quick from our book tour last year. But while I'm flipping through, I wanted to take a quick survey. How many of you have heard of Zappos prior to this? And how many of you have actually shopped with us before? Okay, so very cool. So normally when I do this survey, the ratio is actually about 2-to-1 women to men. And a lot of men I ask say they haven't personally shopped from us, but their wives or significant others have. And a lot of times it's actually on their behalf. And I was giving a tour. We're actually based out of Las Vegas, and we offer tours to the public. A few years ago, I was giving a tour to an executive from one of the major record labels, and if any of you have not taken a tour, would definitely recommend you come for a tour. We'll pick you up from the airport in a Zappos shuttle. Tour takes about an hour, drop you off at the hotel afterwards. And let me just flip over to our offices. And so the tour that I was giving to an executive of one of the major record labels went through the ground floor, which is where our merchandising team is, and then I asked him the exact same question. Had he bought from us before? And he said no, he hadn't personally bought from us, but he suspected his wife had, because these white boxes would show up on his doorstep and then they'd disappear, and he had no idea what was going on. Was she buying them, exchanging them, returning them? And every time he asked her, she would just flat out refuse to answer him and change the subject. So the ground floor is our merchandising department, and then we go upstairs to our customer loyalty team, which is our name for our call center. And we have this whiteboard there where we have all the stats from our call center. How many calls we took yesterday, percent of calls we took and answered in under 20 seconds, sales, and so on. And as I'm explaining through all the different stats, I turn around and he's disappeared. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. And so I kind of backtrack, and then I went down a couple aisles. Turns out he had actually gone down halfway one of the aisles and sat down next to one of our customer service reps and forced her to pull up his wife's account. And he discovered that she had spent over $62,000 in her lifetime. So, yeah, hopefully we weren't instrumental to any divorce proceedings or anything like that. So, actually, before getting into Zappos, we want to talk about what led me to Zappos. And the story actually begins with pizza. This was in college back in 93, 94. I was living in a dorm where there was 300 or 400 students in the dorm, and there was this area set aside on the ground floor, which was a kitchen area, and every year different students could take control of that area and start their own little small business. So my roommate and I, my roommate Sanjay, we decided to get into the pizza business. So we invested in pizza ovens and dealt with suppliers and hired other employees who were basically students, and then ended up, a lot of times I was making the pizzas myself. And this guy named Alfred, who actually later on ended up becoming the CFO at Zappos, this is actually how we met. He would stop by every night and order a large pepperoni pizza from me, which wasn't actually that weird because I had heard about Alfred's reputation for eating a lot. He had nicknames like Human Trash Compactor, Monster, and so on. And later on, when we became friends, I actually personally witnessed this myself. There'd be 10 of us late night at a Chinese restaurant, and he would literally finish everyone's leftovers. So, not that weird. He would order a large pepperoni pizza, but then sometimes he'd come back 2 or 3 hours later and order another large pepperoni pizza from me. And I was thinking, okay, he skipped breakfast or something. And well, I found out several years later, Alfred was taking the pizzas upstairs and selling them off by the slice. And so that's why he became our CFO later at Zappos. So after the pizza business, the same roommate I was running the pizza business with, we started an internet company called Link Exchange. We specialized in online advertising, grew that to 100 or so people, and then ended up selling the company to Microsoft 2.5 years later. But what a lot of people don't know is the real reason why we ended up selling the company. And the real reason is because it just ended up not being a fun place to work at anymore, and the company culture just went completely downhill. I remember when it was just 10 of us, it was kind of your typical .com back in the day. We were working around the clock, sleeping under our desks, had no idea what day of the week it was, but it was a lot of fun and super exciting as we were growing. And as we started growing, we started hiring friends and friends of friends. And I remember there was one friend of mine that I knew from high school. He was on this cross-country road trip from New York to the Bay Area over here, and then we needed a little extra help over the weekend, and then that became a week, and then 2 weeks, and so on, and he eventually ended up joining the company. So this whole strategy of hiring friends and friends of friends worked really, really well for us until we got to about 20 people, and then we ran into a major problem. And the problem was we basically ran out of friends. So then we're thinking, okay, how do we hire people based on resumes and skill sets and interviews and so on, and we'd never done that before. We were fresh out of college, and we ended up learning, I think doing an okay job. We learned through trial and error, but we didn't know any better to pay attention to company culture. And by the time we got to 100 people, some of the people we hired were really bad for our culture, and by the time we got to 100 people, I myself dreaded getting out of bed to go to my own company, which was definitely a weird feeling, and I was thinking, like, if I felt that way, how must all the other employees feel? So that's really what led us to sell the company to Microsoft, and shortly after the sale, I left the company. Sanjay, the other co-founder, left the company. In fact, most of the early employees all left within a few months after the sale. As it turned out, we got super lucky with the timing, so it worked out well financially, and so I was thinking, okay, what should I do with my life now? And I decided to get back together with Alfred, and we formed an investment fund and invested in about 20 or so different internet companies, and Zappos just happened to be one of them. But then over the course of a year, I realized for me, investing was actually kind of boring. I really miss being part of building something. So within a year, I ended up joining Zappos full-time, and I've been with Zappos ever since. Many of you may have heard it was just about 2 years ago that Amazon acquired Zappos, but it's actually very different from most acquisitions that Amazon has done. In most of their acquisitions, the plan is to integrate the company being acquired into the parent company, and then over the course of time, the original company kind of loses its identity and joins the mothership. Whereas for us, we told them, actually as a precondition for even talking about the possibility of doing the deal, that we would only consider it if we could remain independent, if we can continue growing the Zappos brand and our culture and our way of doing business our ways. So from our point of view, it's basically as if we swapped out our board of directors with a new one in. Instead of flying to San Francisco from Vegas once a quarter for a board meeting, we now fly to Seattle once a quarter for a 2-hour meeting, and that's the extent of my interaction with Amazon. So I'm pretty happy that they've stayed true to their word. So most people, when they think of Zappos, think of us as shoes, because that's how we started. But internally, we actually have a saying that we're a service company that just happens to sell shoes. And our hope is that 10 years from now, people won't even realize we started out selling shoes online. And in fact, today we sell a lot more than shoes. We sell clothing and housewares, beauty products, and kitchenware, and so on. And really, our goal is just to build the Zappos brand to be about the very best customer service and customer experience. And we've actually had customers email us and ask us if we could please start an airline or run the IRS. And we're not going to do either of those things this year, but 20 years from now, I wouldn't rule out a Zappos Airlines that's just about delivering the very best customer service and customer experience. So in some ways, it's analogous to Virgin, where they have a whole bunch of different businesses, airlines, music, and so on. The difference is the Virgin brand is more about being hip and cool, whereas we just want to be about the very best customer service. So our whole strategy in terms of marketing and advertising is, let's take most of this money we would have normally spent on paid advertising and paid marketing, and rather spend it on that, invest it into customer service and the customer experience, and then let our customers do the marketing for us through word of mouth. So we've grown from no sales in 1999 to 2008 was the first year we hit $1 billion in gross merchandise sales. And despite the down economy over the last few years, we've actually continued to grow at a rapid rate year over year. And the number one driver of all that growth has been through repeat customers and word of mouth. So these are some of the questions we ask ourselves. We are constantly thinking about, how do we wow our customers? And we use the word wow a lot internally as a verb. And there's things like the free shipping both ways, or 365-day return policy. Running our call center very differently from most call centers. Most call centers, they're either viewed through an expense minimization lens, where it's all about efficiency, getting customers off the phone, or through a revenue lens, how do we generate sales? We actually view our call center through a branding lens. How do we brand ourselves to be about the very best customer service and customer experience? And that's why we don't have scripts. We don't measure performance based on how long someone's on the phone with a customer, or how quickly they get off, and so on. And so for all this focus on customer service and building our brand to be about customer service, the number one priority of the company is actually not customer service. Our number one priority is company culture. And our whole belief is that if we get the culture right, then most of the other stuff, like delivering great customer service or building a long-term enduring brand or business, will just become a natural byproduct of the culture. And so we do a lot on the culture side. It starts with our hiring process. For everyone that we hire, we actually do 2 sets of interviews. The first set is kind of your standard stuff done by the hiring manager and his or her team, where they'll interview for fit within the team, relevant experience, technical ability, and so on. But then we do a second set of interviews, and that's done by our HR department, looking purely for culture fit. And they have to pass both in order to be hired. So we've passed on a lot of really smart, talented people that we know can make an immediate impact on our top or bottom line. But if they're bad for our culture, we won't hire them for that reason alone. And the reverse is true too. Even if someone's doing their specific job function perfectly fine, even if they're a superstar in that job function, if they're bad for our culture, we'll fire them for that reason alone. And performance reviews are based on, are 50% based on whether you're living or inspiring the Zappos culture in others. The other thing we do is everyone that's hired into our headquarters, doesn't matter what position, accountant, lawyer, software developer, goes through the exact same training as our call center reps. We go over company history, the importance of company culture, our philosophy about customer service, and then everyone's actually on the phone for 2 weeks taking real calls from real customers. And the reason why we have everyone go through that, regardless of position, is because if we're serious about building our brand to be about the very best customer service and customer experience, then customer service shouldn't just be a department. It should be the entire